If you have been thinking about studying in the USA, you have probably heard two completely opposite opinions. One person tells you, don't go, the American dream is over. Someone else says, the USA is still the best country in the world. So who's actually right? Over the last 2 years, we have spoken to hundreds of students with the exact dilemma. Some eventually landed at jobs at companies like NASA and Dassault Systems. Others decided not to go to US at all. And honestly, that was the right decision for them too. So the real question isn't, is the USA worth it? The real question is, for whom is it still worth it? And that's exactly what we are going to answer in this video. So in this video, we'll take a look at the two major concerns, jobs and immigration that students have and how much you really should be worrying about these. Then I'll share 6 practical strategies to reduce those risks if you decide to go. By the end of this video, you should have a much clearer idea of whether the US is still the right choice for your situation. Hi, my name is Akhilesh from AdmitAbroad, and we have helped hundreds of students get into top ranked universities across the world. We also make videos helping students to make the right career and study abroad choices. So if you haven't already, do subscribe to the channel and it will be a win-win for both of us. This is probably the biggest concern. Whenever we speak to the students, this is the first question they ask. Am I going to spend upwards of rupees 60 lakh rupees and then struggle to find a job? And it is a fair, logical question. After all, we have all seen the headlines about the layoff and about how job openings are lower than what they were pre-COVID. So does this mean that the USA is no longer worth it? Not exactly. Here's what people miss. The USA isn't the one job market. It's actually dozens of job markets. Some industries are struggling, but others are hiring aggressively. And if you only look at the overall headlines, you'll completely miss that difference. For example, healthcare continues to have strong demand. Civil engineering and construction management continue to benefit from the infrastructure investment. Manufacturing, especially advanced manufacturing and semiconductor related roles, has also seen significant hiring. So if you're pursuing one of these fields, the return on investment can still be excellent. Okay, but what about tech? That's where most students get worried. And yes, compared to 2021 and early 2022, hiring is definitely more competitive. But here's something interesting. The demand isn't disappearing. It's shifting. Companies aren't just looking for software engineers anymore. They are increasingly looking for people who understand AI, machine learning, data engineering, cloud infrastructure, and related technologies. In other words, the question isn't simply, do I want to work in tech? It's, do I have the skills employers are hiring for today? The distinction matters. Let me give you an example. A couple of years ago, one of our students went to the US for a master's in information systems. Before leaving India, they didn't have full-time work experience, but they had built a strong portfolio through projects and internships. Today, they work at Dassault Systems. Another student joined a public university in Texas. Again, no prior full-time experience, but they had relevant projects, research work, and a strong technical foundation. Today, they work with NASA. Now, obviously, these are individual examples. I'm not saying every student will have the same outcomes, but they illustrate an important point. Employers don't only evaluate your degree or the years of experience you have, they evaluate the evidence that you can solve real problems, projects, research, internships, open source contributions, relevant technical skills. Those things matter, sometimes a lot more than people realize. So before deciding whether the USA is still worth it, don't ask how many layoffs happened this year. Instead, ask, are employers hiring people with my skills? Those are two very different questions. If your field has a healthy demand, if you're building the right portfolio, and if your degree leads to careers that companies are actively hiring for, then the US can still offer one of the strongest career opportunities in the world. It has the most number of high-paying jobs of any country in the world, and it is still the world's largest economy by a long shot. But if you're entering a saturated field without relevant skills, or you're choosing a program with weak career outcomes, then spending 50 to 70 lakh rupees becomes much harder to justify. The country isn't the only variable. Your preparation matters just as much. The next concern students have is about stay-back options in the USA. People are afraid that Donald Trump's government might strike down the OPT and the H-1B altogether, and it's totally understandable to feel scared about this, especially based on how the media covers it. Let's take a deeper look into this. First of all, talk about ending the OPT is not something new. It's been going since before Donald Trump. In fact, ever since the OPT extension was announced in 2008, it has been challenged no less than 10 times, and yet the OPT continues. The thing is, the OPT is not something that one person can easily end. If the USA wanted to end the OPT, they would have to go through a long and complicated process. If the Department of Homeland Security wanted to end the OPT, they can't just make a unilateral decision. First, it needs to go through an internal review. Next, if it does pass the internal review, the decision would need to be assessed by a committee, and getting approval here is difficult because, as per some reports, international students contribute to 43 billion US dollars to the American economy annually and supports over 350,000 jobs. Therefore, the negative economic impact of removing the OPT is quite large and will directly impact several large universities that depend on funding from the tuition received from international students. But assuming it does go through, it still needs to go through an OMB review. And after that, it has to go through a public comment period during which people are allowed to leave their comments if this change is viable. And even if all this happens, it still needs to go through a congressional approval, which is very tough. And finally, there will also be legal challenges. American courts have upheld the OPT multiple times in the past when it has been challenged. So the whole process is long and convoluted. And even if it does happen at an accelerated pace, it won't happen before the fall 2027 intake. Now, if you fly to the USA in this intake, when the OPT still exists, any rules change with regards to the OPT will not affect you, since you went to the USA when the OPT was in force. Now, the next thing that students worry about with regards to the immigration is the H-1B or the work visa. Yes, you have heard that right. US government now charges $100,000 to companies to hire employees on H-1B. But did you know that this is not applicable to students already in the USA? Yes, you heard that right. This rule is only applicable to those who apply for an H-1B from outside the USA directly and is therefore only aimed at companies such as TCS and Infosys that previously applied en masse for H-1B visas on behalf of their employees. So note that you face lesser competition for the same number of H-1B slots. Your chances of getting H-1B visa has increased and the data supports this. In 2024, the percentage of petitioners who got H-1B was 24%, and in 2026, in the most recent lottery, the number has increased to 35%. The other thing Donald Trump did, which can improve your H-1B chances, is change it from pure lottery-based system to a wage-based system. Put simply, the higher your wage relative to the others in similar jobs in the same location, the higher your chance of getting the H-1B. So how does this work? Well, the US government has classified salaries into 4 levels. Someone with a salary in level 1 will have their application put once in the H-1B, but someone at level 4 will have their application put 4 times. Your goal is to get an L2 or L3 level salary, because if you get an L1 level salary, your chances of getting an H-1B are quite low, because getting an L4 level salary immediately after masters is very difficult. And doing this is actually feasible if you choose the right location, program, and university. So all in all, the whole situation with the OPT and the H-1B is not as bad as what the media has made it out to be. And in some regards, the changes made have actually helped the students, not hurt them. Now, the final challenge with immigrating to the USA is getting the green card. Yes, the process is complex and long, but doable. However, if getting a quick PR is your priority, then you can look at other countries. So we spoke about the two major concerns that students have with regards to studying in the USA. Now I want to quickly share 6 strategies to minimize your risk of studying in the USA. Strategy 1. Apply for a STEM program. If you do think of studying in the USA, please look for STEM designated programs. These are programs that fall under science, technology, engineering, and math. The reason is simple. Non-STEM programs allow you only a 1-year OPT, while a STEM program allows you a 3-year OPT. This means that you have only one shot at an H-1B after a non-STEM program, but 3 chances at an H-1B after a STEM designated program, which greatly increases your chances of getting the H-1B. Now, if you plan to study something for which you cannot find a single STEM designated program in the USA, then I would advise looking at other countries with longer stay-back options, unless of course ROI isn't a factor for you. Strategy 2. Applying early for the fall intake. This is a major intake in the USA. Most universities open their application portals in September, and deadlines for the same are usually in December or January. Now, many programs explicitly mention that they do not review applications till deadlines, but many programs evaluate applications on a rolling basis. So students who apply early get an advantage with regards to getting admits and scholarships as well, because at the start of the application season, universities have 100% of the scholarship budget intact, and it's easier for them to give out scholarships. So if you get scholarship, that reduces cost and consequently reduces your risk. Strategy 3. Get some experience. Remember how I said you can get a job in the USA if you get some experience? Let's go deeper into that. Look, if you have a year or 2 years of experience, that's great, but experience is only useful if it's directly relevant to the job you are applying for. Let's say if your goal is to become an AI engineer, then working in AI ML and to some extent even backend engineering will help. But working in front-end development or QA just won't help. So this means that the quality of your experience is more important than its quantity. Look, I know the job market's hard everywhere right now. So if you can't get a job directly relevant to what you want to study abroad, then at least try to get an internship. And if you can't get that, work as a freelancer using platforms like Upwork or Fiverr. And even if that isn't possible, you can build your own project, do your own independent research, and compile everything into a portfolio as proof of work. The most important thing is that you have proof of work in the US job market before you start job hunting. Strategy 4. Co-op programs. In the USA, many universities offer something called as co-op programs. These are programs wherein for a semester or two, you basically work in the industry instead of studying in the program. This has three advantages. First, you get paid as a full-time employee, so you can use the money from this to cover some of the cost of education. Second, if you do a good job, your company might give you an offer before you graduate. And third, even if the company doesn't give you the offer, you now have relevant international work experience that you can leverage to get a job. So this reduces both your cost of education and risk. The fifth strategy is to apply to a day one CPT program. These are programs just like the co-op program where you work with a company. But whereas with co-op programs, you usually work after a semester or two. With a day one CPT program, you can work with the company if you choose to in the first semester itself. The main advantage here is that you start recovering some part of the cost of your education from the first day itself. But you do need to be careful about the university you select because some universities have been known to abuse this model and are under the US government scanner for this reason. The sixth strategy to minimize risk is to apply to multiple countries. Yes, the USA might be your first choice, but there's no harm in applying to universities in other countries that are good for your field. This has two advantages. First, it removes the pressure of having to decide on the US upfront, and second, you get multiple options. So in the last moment, if for any reason you decide to ditch the USA, you at least have offers from universities in other countries in hand, and you can avoid wasting a year that way. So in summary, we have spoken about the concerns students have with respect to studying in the USA, and I've also shared 6 strategies to reduce risk when students choose to study in the USA. So finally, should you study in the USA? Honestly, it depends on your situation. Again, if you have the skills, if you get into a STEM program that leads to high demand jobs, then you should absolutely consider it. Now, if you don't have the skills, I would actually advise against not just studying in the USA, but anywhere in the world. Because getting a job is tough anywhere in the world if you don't have the skills. Finally, if you do have the skills, but there aren't too many jobs in the USA for your field, then I'd advise to look at countries where there are jobs for your fields or the cost of education is lower. And if that doesn't clear things up, schedule a consultation with us with the link in the description and we'll help figure things out. As always, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.